And action. Hey everyone, it's Dr. Rick. Sally had a question about overeating. Overeating is common in this season, and we have to be aware of, we just have to be aware. But if this is the first time you're finding me, don't forget to hit the subscribe button that you'll find down below and the alert button to find out when I do new videos. And this is supposed to be mistletoe, so just in commemorance of winter. So, overeating. So, we have to be careful. One of the biggest things I find is that when you walk into someone's house, in the Philippines, you walk into somebody's house, you're greeted with a plate. Number one, you don't piss off the host. We're supposed to get together and commemorate. We're supposed to get together and have a feast, celebrate, and it's the beauty of the whole thing is to get together. If you want to break it down into functional medicine, when you do share laughter and camaraderie, hugs and kisses and food, there's a lot of serotonin and oxytocin that's released from every cell in the body. And I did do a video on orgasmic eating, and I'll put the link down below. Might give you an idea, but there's great things with that. But you don't want to be guilty later on, so I think there's a way to temper this. There's a way to pace yourself. And the first thing is you always grab the plate. My dad used to get so pissed off when people would come in and say, I'm a vegetarian, or I'm not hungry. I mean, that's not what you go to a party for. You at least get the plate and put the stuff on the plate, or look around like it's interesting. And you don't have to eat it, but you can just hold it. That was one of my tricks, is sometimes because, grandma spends so much time making food. Nowadays you probably just go and buy it catered, but if you didn't indulge in the food, then you insulted grandma. So it's nice to just put, and I have a feeling the older hosts are watching you eat. They definitely are going to stand by and watch the garbage can, because if you dump any food in the garbage can, it's going to be like, what are you doing? So just hang out, walk around, but pace yourself. So one of the challenges is when you go into a big feast and you walk into the kitchen, and most of the celebration is actually in the kitchen or in the dining room, and there's always going to be food around. And I had a pet peeve where if you are gathering around the table and all the food is on the table and you're talking across the table, you are spitting on the food. And I learned that from my wife, and so I would usually want to have food that's not on the table. Or get it before everybody starts talking and laughing and coughing out loud. So, but you didn't realize that. So it's kind of interesting when you go into a kitchen and you're greeted, or you greet everybody and say, whoa, because of just the layout. My mom used to have the best layout. Everybody would go home with leftovers, roast beef, salmon, egg rolls, turkey, a couple other things that we'd carve up, ham, and then all their fixings, and you just go around the table slowly like it was a procession. And everybody would usually wind up really full at the end. But you also have to be careful. So pace yourself. Don't piss off anybody. Pace yourself. Have a nice balance of food. I would always choose protein first. So sometimes the concept is if you eat protein first, then you don't get that glycemic index, or you don't get the insulin response to turn on so high. So if you do carbohydrates first, then your pancreas will sense high carbohydrate load and your insulin will start to shoot up already. Insulin is a very innocent bystander hormone. It responds to your food choices. So if you make most of your stuffed stomach protein, then I guess the watchdog pancreas looks and sees, oh, I guess there's no carbohydrates, so we can turn off. And then you stuff down carbohydrate and mix it into the mix, the pancreas won't notice as much. It's kind of like trying to escape a prison. You have to be careful that the guards don't notice you. So if we don't want the insulin to be sent out in a spike, you get your proteins first, maybe your fats, and then maybe your carbohydrate. Now that makes your plate and your meal very scientific, but there's a way to, you don't have to be like obsessive compulsive and whip out your calorie counter, your macronutrient counter and say how much is this, how much is this. But if you just get really good at choosing protein, and remember, protein is not just animal. You can have protein in the form of plant, but if you're really good at knowing things and reading about things first, and then choosing protein first, then you're good. Now, sometimes before everybody gets there, nobody touches the food until the whole party is started. That's the very strict. I learned that when I went to an Indian party. You can't touch the food until everybody is allowed to go to the kitchen or the dining room. But if you're waiting, I guess you can have alcohol or beer or wine, but that too is a carbohydrate, and that will turn on insulin spikes. So, and I guess it'll get you less, it'll get you a little inebriated, but less inhibited faster if your issue is being shy. But that's going to be turning on. That's putting shyness in front of that carbohydrate hit. So that's a different story. But if you can choose proteins first, that would be important. You you have to have somebody with you. If you have a wingman, especially if you're the host or you're a relative and you're in deep conversation. I did a video on mindless eating. Check it out down below too. But if you're deep into conversation and you're eating next to the table where all the food is, it might be easy to just refill, eat, have more conversation, refill, eat, join in on more intense conversation or debate, refill, eat. So you have to be careful that you don't think in half an hour, holy crap, I just ate 3 platefuls, but I had a decent conversation. So you have to be aware, and sometimes a wingman can keep an eye on you. Especially as you get intoxicated, you're not going to be able to stop and you're going to be able to say, what did this Gil say about proteins and carbohydrates? I don't care. I'm having an egg roll. So wingmen will not only guide you and say, hey, what's up? You're eating too much? Or easy, time out, or, but they'll also be able to drive you home in case you drink too much. So always keep somebody as a designated eater, designated driver, designated eater. Again, if you choose protein first, it does act as a satiety macronutrient. Fats, fiber, and protein, they don't turn on such, depending on the fiber source, they don't turn on such an insulin-heavy response, but they do give a sense of satiety. Satiety, which is what you have to learn to appreciate. Satiety is when the signals from the stomach say, you're good. We often don't listen to those signals. The hunger signals, if you are starving, then you won't be able to hear the signals because the brain is in rescue mode and it's going to just say eat everything in front of you, even past the point of satiety, because we were just in a starvation. There was no food around. We must indulge. We must put down as much as possible because there won't be food for another week. But obviously that doesn't really happen, but the brain gets into that mode. So that's mindless eating. Again, if you, one of the tasks or one of the exercises we had at the Chopra Center was eating in silence. And when you're in a table of 10 and you're kind of facing each other and eating in silence, it becomes very awkward, but you also learn to look at your plate. Looking at your plate, eating each pea, noticing the indent on each pea, noticing how the fish is cooked, how it looks on the outside, how the streaks of meat are, noticing how the broccoli looks like a forest, a tree. I mean, all these things, they sound weird, but when you are mindful of what you're eating and mindful of how it tastes and mindful of how many chews it takes, the texture of the food, going slow. I mean, wine connoisseurs do it all the time. They look at the clarity, or they look at how the wine stirs, they smell the effervescence, they taste, they sip. It's important to also do that with food. And sometimes when you're hungry and you just eat everything, like Hungry Fraternity, you'll fill your stomach, but the taste buds will say, I didn't experience anything, so I want more of that. So you have to learn to go slowly, even if you're hungry. Go slowly, mindfully, learn the cues of satiety as far as taste, as far as smells, as far as being famished. The basic symptom that we all will listen to is over distension. Distension is actually a pain receptor. It's a stretch fiber in the stomach, and if that's the only thing you listen for or look for or feel, you're already past the point of obesity. You're going to be even overeating all the time. So sometimes going in peace, eating in silence, and taking your time with a few meals in a week, it'll reset your feeling of what is satiety. If this tasting this food, is this food valuable to me, or is this crappy food? And when you can slow down a little bit, you can make better choices. So speaking of crappy food, if you enter the household with a starving mind, or a pissed off mind, or a depressed mind, or a sad mind, the mind will make you hunt for the fastest source of emotional support. And that's usually going to be something that raises the insulin fast. And it's typically going to be a carbohydrate, a sweet, something with sweet, salt, and fat. And that's usually the most processed and the most unhealthy. So if you go in and allow the mind to eat in starvation, you'll eat crap. And when you, or at least you'll hunt for crap. Now when you grab that crap, like if there's going to be a big table around and there's healthy stuff, there's feast stuff, and there's crappy stuff, you'll probably eyeball the candy, even though you know in your mind, I want to eat the candy, I want to take the feast stuff. Well, your brain will have a beeline making you look at and appreciate and crave the candy. That's just, again, the body's built-in mechanism. So that's why it is important to listen, wait a little bit, maybe not go to the party starving, then just take your time. If you take your time and get those feelings away, the hormone waves that attack you will calm down. And then you'll be able to think properly or clearly. And you'll be able to make the choice and take your time with that versus just relying on guttural, instinctual response. I mean, it's normal to do that, but you should be able to control it. Dogs, animals can't control it. Humans can control it. So use the forebrain as best as possible. Don't forget also, when you do eat something, either you pay it forward by exercising or fasting or trying to lose a pound or two the couple days before the feast, if you know you're going to overindulge, or the day after the feast, know that you're going to have to do some exercise. So if it's like 10 o'clock at night and you're still eating, or others are saying, hey, have some more dessert now, you can, at that point in time, I think it's fair enough, it's kind enough to say, well, I have to go, I have a competition tomorrow, I can't get full. I think that's a nice way to bow out. I still honor the host, but obviously if you go to the party and you go home late and you sleep a little late, you should do some walking, some exercise the next day. It'll burn up more calories, more than usual. In fact, after you eat that night, you should take a quick walk around somewhere. A brisk walk, just say you're going to go to your car, get something, go outside, take a brisk walk back and forth. It sometimes offsets that insulin response. So you have a hormone response that releases endorphin and enkephalin. It can kind of balance the insulin. If you have nothing but unopposed insulin, that's inflammation, then you're going to actually crash and get tired. If you have like a little bit of endorphin, a little bit of enkephalin, other things involved, then you'll balance it out so it's not the dominant hormone. Dominant hormone is important for setting the tone for where you're going in the next 12 hours as far as hunting for food later on, or being satiated later on, or sleeping deeper later on. So a little bit of a brisk walk, and again, I've mentioned it in other videos, in Italy, passeggiata, or walking after and saying hello to neighbors and stuff. Really important. You can actually take a walk outside, or say you're walking the dog. That's a nice excuse to get outside. So remember, Sally, this is a great idea, especially in the holidays. We don't want to be gaining, and this is why most Americans will gain 2 pounds every holiday. And it doesn't sound like 2 pounds is much, but if you gain 2 pounds every holiday, in 10 years, that's 20 pounds. That's a lot of weight. If how many patients of mine are struggling just to get 10 pounds off? And if you gain 20 every year, and by the time you see me, you're in your 50s and 60s, that could be 40 pounds. That'll seem like such an impossible mountain to climb. That'll be so defeating to even start. So that's why we start ahead of time. And that always starts with the feast. So a couple of things that I put here. Fiber, this is acacia fiber. You can mix it in with water. This will be a satiety or a filler. Now, you're not going to bring this to the party, but a couple of ideas. Protein powder, always important. And then this is a beer that I found outside my back door here. I think one of the workers had it. It's been there for a while. I thought I'd use it. There's actually something floating in there. But just be careful, because these are empty calories. 200 calories of beer, maybe a glass of wine, 2 of them at the least. That's 400 calories. Really, that's almost the whole meal. If you're only doing a 1,200 calorie a day diet, you just cut yourself short. So be careful. This I wanted to show you. This is also my pet peeve. So when I go to the Century Stratford Theater, you can buy one of these at the beginning of the year and then get refills for $3.85. So that's that, $3.85. Or you can buy this big guy for $4.50, and you can see you get almost twice as much. Now the problem with mindless eating is this or this. I sometimes make the excuse, I'm going to get this because I have my kids with me. But usually they don't have as much popcorn. And then I find by the time the whole movie, by the time the preview is finished, I'm almost halfway done. And then by the time you're into the first act of 3 acts, I'm like at the bottom of this thing and thinking, oh, what the heck did I just do? It's because I was watching such a good movie. I blame it on that. But then I'm guilty after this, and I got to exercise like I'm doing a marathon the next day. So this is a typical example of mindless eating. You have to be careful. This is crappy food. Tastes good. Reminds me of days with my dad going to see the movies all the time with a Coke and a popcorn. So cool, so cheap supposedly, and they make a ton of money. But then you pay for it because your insulin levels spike, and then you put on another inch on your belly. So please be careful when you are eating. Make it enjoyable. But Sally is a really good question. I have a problem this time of year all the time, but what keeps me in the game personally is I usually set a goal for like March. March is when I have to be really in shape for a big Dr. Rick hiking excursion. This year we're thinking about Bryce Canyon in Utah, and I'm going to be starting to do some training. In fact, next week or a week following, before Christmas, I'll probably be going to Devil's Lake and doing a couple miles. Heavy backpack, just taking some pictures. So I'll put some pictures of my journey just to start prepping for March. Yes, I'm prepping for March already. I think we have to we can't neglect the holiday season. Never can neglect the holiday season. Never can neglect the host. Never can neglect the feast in front of you. But I think I can think ahead into March, think ahead into the next year without neglecting the current, and be happy without being guilty. So good question, Sally. For those of you who have the same problem with overeating, maybe if you put your techniques of how you deal with it, that'd be great. So the rest of you, don't forget to subscribe and give me a thumbs up if you like the video. Share it if you can. Otherwise, I'll see you next time in the clinic.